What was the name of the cult that you were in again?
I had been seeing Dr. Ruun. I actually still didn't know if it was pronounced Ruun like Boone or with a slight I like Ruin. I'd heard from my recommendee not to worry, that she'd tread lightly with patients in calling whatever org they'd left a cult if the shoe fit. We had just started using the C word, in fact. But I didn't really have that as a problem, because my cult wasn't like other cults. But I didn't tell her that. Again, I don't really like saying its name.
I know. But again, as you know, I don't take physical notes. I have learned it's best with certain organizations.
Indeed, an interesting rule was that she had no trash on the premises. No trash cans in the waiting room. If I brought a soda can or something, she'd ask I take it with me. Some cults like to wade through trash, apparently. They're called the RUS, the Red Umbrella Society.
And they're still operating? There are still members?
Most likely. There must be, of course, because I didn't leave long ago. There are factions, but things have disrupted it. It's complicated. Dr. Ruun nodded. She had the habit of tilting her face askew just ever so slightly as she looked at me, sensing my discomfort. It reminded me of when a puppy puts its floppy little ear towards the ground in confusion. She gave me a little smile at first I thought was patronizing, but eventually I could see... She could see me. She was trying to see me, anyway. And I was almost starting to see me. I liked my attic apartment. I liked being at that level and even climbing up all 5 floors. I didn't mind that my only window was facing a brick wall. I had a small skylight which nourished me with a little spare sunbeam for the couple hours a day I was there. On occasion, a bit of glancing moonlight. I didn't mind the elevator was always out of service. I didn't particularly like that the stairway lights flickered, but I was starting to just, overall, generally, I guess, relax. Gratefully, time was somehow equaling distance. Several months back, it wasn't the case. The first thing I did after I got the apartment was go and buy a little pistol on the black market. The guy who knew the guy who knew the guy I barely knew and shouldn't have probably trusted led me through this back door and then that, and I just followed through swinging double doors like I was on a tour of the Campbell Soup Factory. This is so stupid of me, I kept thinking. And all the while, as I waited for the last guy with my envelope of money to return with my gun, I remember asking myself, am I doing something that will invite him in? But once I had the pistol, I did feel calmer. I planned it out at least 100 times in my mind. I gave a dry run 3 or 4 times. In the stairwell, I'd grab my little friend and remove the safety, and shaking, tilt it up to my chin and brace myself against the wall, rigid and ready to write the final line in my novel. What had I thought in that moment? A few times, nothing. I felt numb, not entirely, unpleasantly numb, somewhat like a relief. But the last time, before I realized no one was there, I flashed on Nedovicius's face and his piercing green eyes, and I thought of the little pink bunny bag he gave me, hanging on a rusty hook in my closet. Every week or so, I'd take it out and look it over, slowly, in detective-like fashion, like he'd hidden some clue for me somewhere in the stitches. What was in that stairwell to frighten me? The lights flickering just as the pipes moaned, perhaps a shadow, or else the sound of someone. I could swear there was someone who shouted through the walls in a dull whisper. And maybe it reminded me of my father's horse 2 packs a day shouting when I was really little, unconsciously. That's what I'd figured out anyway with Dr. Ruun. I discarded the gun after that, at least from my person. I stuffed it in a sock, and then in an old oven mitt, and then in a shoebox in a closet. Sometimes when I was talking to Dr. Ruun, or she was talking to me, because she didn't know all the details, all about the immortal vampires and the blood rites, and my friend who was now stalking to murder me, who was more shadow than man, she almost made me believe none of it had been real. She almost made me believe that I was just like her other clients. I had just been part of a cult and that the cult had distorted the way I see the world. But waking up, as hard as it was a good thing. What a relief it will feel eventually. But I did like being seen, even if she didn't know what she was seeing. It's just some of the things turned out to be true, you know? Like, they're still true in certain ways.
Well, yes, some of the things that were true can still be true. The value you got doesn't have to be washed away. You don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? What are some of the things that still feel true to you?
Off the top, I don't know.
Anything that used to be really helpful, useful in your day-to-day, valuable, special?
I guess, well, one thing I liked that I had was knowing that we had the capacity to be more than connected to something larger, I guess. It was like it gave the world a kind of sheen, like it made things technicolor.
And what about now? Is the world not in technicolor anymore?
No, definitely not. But it hadn't been in a while, even when I was still in. I don't know why. Things just faded, despite the fact that I still sort of believed.
Right. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking about faith, no?
Yeah, somewhat.
So there are plenty of rational, highly cogent, even scientific thinkers who have faith, who have religion. Does that feel strange to you?
We tended to arrive at this particular cul-de-sac a few times a month. What could I do but smile and keep encouraging her? I noticed the William Blake print in her waiting room right away. This gave me pause at first, but since therapy was about saying my mind, I asked her about it, and she told me it belonged to a previous occupant, and did it bother me? The painting was called Jacob's Ladder. I thought it was oddly religious for a therapist's office, though most of my knowledge of therapy came from the TV I watched in college. Growing up, I told Dr. Ruun, we were told therapists, psychologists were unrealized mystics. We were told about Jung as a kind of prophet, but the psychoanalytical aspects were hidden from us, and we revered him along with Blake, such that when I came upon either one of them in school, I was suddenly filled with dread should I read anything unapproved on them. It was a beautiful piece. A spiral staircase led to the heavens with women and angels descending from it. Before she would call me in, I would try to examine every little detail, and when I was done with my sessions, riding the subway for moments at a time, feeling inexplicably small like a child, and arrived at my own stairway, I'd try to remember how I felt staring at Blake's stairway before my sessions, and that calmed me as I took the first step. Somehow I felt Nedovicius's hand on my shoulder, telling me I was doing the right thing. I wish I could have asked him if I believed that the image of the staircase protected me, that perhaps it would. If faith was childish, why had he given me a child's bag? I'd chosen to go back to New York because it was familiar and it was crowded. It distracted me from myself.
Have you thought about joining any groups, like the ones I suggested, or?
No, not really. I mean, I've looked a little casually.
I think it'd be good for you. I do think you're ready.
Maybe.
What's the fear?
I don't know. I do feel different. I guess I worry that I'll fall back into old habits. Caretaking people, seeing their vulnerabilities, seeing their needs and not being able to help themselves. Or help myself, I guess.
And that would be so bad? That's a lot of what humans do, take care of each other.
I understand. I don't know why it's so wrapped up.
Because you have needs yourself.
I don't know.
What do you need from people?
From people? I don't even know. I don't even know what my needs are, period. The word even just makes me feel cringy because, I don't know, like I'm in some kind of infancy. But also in our organization, they'd say, needing is feeding. I caught myself. I blushed. It took me a hot second to realize I hadn't said enough to tip my hand, to have me institutionalized for my belief in vampires. Feeding could be metaphorical. Dr. Ruun did the head tilty thing. My eyes shifted into a nothing corner of the room.
Sure. And that's common in a system of indoctrination, but we've gone over that. It's also part of being human. Our needs change. Sometimes we spend all day figuring out what our needs are, or had been, and then the day is over. I experience that. Everyone does. What would you say it would be for you, usually, at the end of the day?
It was a question I focused hard on remembering so that I had an answer the next time I saw her. There was a part of me that needed to feel safe, sure. I could tell Dr. Ruun, what I need is for there not to be an evil vampire who's hunting a few dozen of us and who killed my last known relative, and apparently whose likelihood of doing so depends on my belief in their existence. Could you help me with that need, Doc? But if she could conceive of that being true, she'd say, that was a need in the negative. What could I need in the positive? In college, I studied engineering, mechanical, but I did so because I was asked to by the leader. I did so because he told my parents that's what I should do. And I was lucky enough to see the world a little, so I didn't question. Lucky enough to get into a school with my spotty, largely forged test scores. What I really needed was to rewind the clock and not push away every chance at love or even friendship with a shoegazer. That's what we called those outside of the society, I told Dr. Ruun. I laughed at them when I said it. Shoegazer. Such a stupid term. It's amazing how he just made shit up. Some of it still feels true, though, but some of it was borrowed true, and most of it, if it was true in the kind of way all artistic expression is. I guess truth is beauty, beauty, truth, yada, yada. But most of it was vague prophecy, or sometimes it was humor, and if you didn't get the joke, you were made to feel you didn't get the deeper wisdom, like considered a Zen koan shoegazer. He got it from navel gazer, probably. And that's what I realized just now, and what made me laugh, because it wasn't all that original. He meant that we were looking at the stars, the infinite, and the rest of humanity at their shoes, at only their next step, I guess, in terms of his creative oeuvre of constructing a reality for all of us to live in. It was hacky, wasn't it? Dr. Ruun wasn't sure. I remembered the time I broke the rules when I was a teenager and went into his office at the RUS library, and how I found a few books on his shelf with empty pages, and how I could have kept going, how I'd suspected for a brief, terrifying second that they were probably all empty. What a blatant fraud. But I wasn't ready then. So I told myself that maybe it was just a couple of dummies because he needed the library shelves to be full-seeming. How many times I could have walked away? How many times I questioned what our goals were? How many times had I pushed down my instincts, dulled by diligent practice, even when, like the subway, rumbling beneath it was telling me of another level, another reality that was just beneath our feet. I kept odd but fearfully logical hours. I slept between 6 a.m. and 12:30, maybe 1:45 at the latest. My therapist was at 3 o'clock on Tuesdays, so that was the only day I felt a little rushed. I alternated going south out of my building, then north, then east, then west, and then tried to mix it up the next time, with hopefully no real predictable pattern. I took the train when I didn't have to take the train for any reason, and I got off at stops I didn't even think ahead about. I stayed mostly in Manhattan, but occasionally went into Brooklyn. I did have a pattern of stopping into bookshops and going to the antique section. I could spend a good few hours that way, looking for uncertain. Sometimes I thought I was looking for some sign that the RUS had offloaded its collection. Doubtful. I did have a mental list of books that made mention of the Fountain of Youth. There were a good many that could be found at the New York Public I saw online, but I was saving that for a special occasion. How did the Fountain of Youth and vampires become so entangled? A few times, by accident, I walked by the RUS library, if it was still there. The snake insignia was. I didn't tarry in that neighborhood long. When I got a good distance away, the only thing that calmed my nerves was to climb down to the subway, hope it were crowded, and stand with my back against the interior car door. Every body that pressed near me felt like a shield, and I felt soothed by the congregate smells. Everyone in the RUS had a similar scent due to the lotions, which I'd stopped using on the off chance that they did something nefarious. But in the subway, the top note was always someone who wore too much perfume. There were middle notes of tobacco or greasy food, and the bottom notes were the most personally abhorrent or attractive. Sweat and dirt, which could send me into either a dark or a pleasant reverie, the shaking of the subway car allowing memory to percolate like the bubbling of coffee grounds. In the welcome turbulation, I recalled the day Chang came to visit me at university. It was a few months away from the finish line. None of my family would make it, of course. I would have been embarrassed if they had, worried even. I didn't want my special dispensation to upset any of their work. But Chang and I exchanged a few letters my senior year. We'd gotten to know each other a little when I came home for the Dowser's birthday in Glasgow. Home. By home, I mean wherever the RUS would ask us to be. Still, Vermont felt most like home now. I especially liked this time of year, January and February, when traditionally, due to the cost of warming everything in winter, the university demanded a special course of independent off-campus study. Most students went south or west, but I reveled at the chance to be alone with the campus, the countryside, and most importantly, with my thoughts unperceived. I had my own apartment, and Chang wrote me a letter asking to visit. He was near enough my age, although I never knew or would ask him what his actually was. This was RUS cultural protocol. But it felt okay, and I remember walking through campus with him. There were still a few dozen students. I remember reveling in their looks of me, petite and shy, and not unattractive probably, but a wallflower, striding beside this tall, well-dressed man who could have been a Hong Kong film star. I took his arm as we walked, and he was somewhat surprised. The RUS had some precepts about physical touch. Even through his winter coat, it felt electric. What did we talk about? Unlike myself, who had been born into the RUS, Chang was joining the ranks. He was eager to gain access, to master the teachings, to please the Dowser. It all feels so foreign in recollection, but it must have been familiar, normal, and expected to talk about. At times, I do remember wanting to tell him about the things I questioned, the things I'd been thinking of late, the things that didn't add up. Before he left for good, we walked one final time on campus, deserted. It began to snow, and every little snowflake was marvelous. It dusted the grass until we both decided to lie in it. We lay beside each other, and I remember thinking, what I see, he sees in this moment, and I could almost feel what he felt, an odd feeling.
I didn't mention both my parents died recently, did I?
I looked over at him. Strangely, I didn't say anything, or if I did, it was too inconsequential a muttering.
My mother, and then my father a month later. They were nothing if not efficient. I barely had the time to grieve my father, my mother, I mean, and then we were back at the hospital. It's just like he faded. It's like he just faded away. Like he had a schedule in his mind. It almost felt like a challenge, like I'd have to live up to his death when my time came. Isn't that sick? I'm laughing about it now. I mean, grief does funny things with time. And those months feel like a lifetime away now.
After seeing Dr. Ruun, I made the mistake of forgetting to pick up my prescription at the pharmacy when I remembered hours later, leagues away in Brooklyn where I was going antique book hunting. The pharmacy had closed. I was out of my sleeping pills. I was filled with dread. But then I remembered that I probably had a few stashed away in the pink bunny bag as precaution. I got it out of the closet and reached inside, and indeed, I found a single pill, and then my hand, it felt something I hadn't felt before. It was lodged beneath the lining, a little bump of fabric or something. I reached on the side and found a little slit and pulled it out. It was the strangest thing. A bit of blue moss. Or rather, it was natural moss, but it had absorbed some blue paint or something. A small finger length, almost 2 fingers wide. I set it on my bedside table. Then my alarm went off, the alarm I set every day for sunrise. I got a glass of water and downed my pill. I watched The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, all the while unconsciously petting the little blue moss ever so carefully so as not to disturb the layer of paint that had somehow almost magically encrusted itself in it. Finally, I felt sleepy, turned off the TV, and went to sleep. I hadn't remembered many of my dreams of late, but that night would remind me of what I said to Dr. Ruun. It was like it was in Technicolor. I was in my bed still, only there was no roof above. There was snow coming down from a sky of black, like that time with Chang. And just as I watched the snowflakes fall on the foot of my bed, I saw that Chang was there, looking sad. I recoiled in fear, but then I suddenly realized that my blanket was made of the blue moss, and that gave me some comfort, some feeling that I was protected. Chang opened his mouth and received a single snowflake on his tongue. His fangs showed unmistakably, and a part of me knew I was in a dream and that if I could, I should wake up. But a part of me was also mesmerized, and I knew suddenly in that moment that I loved him, that I'd always loved him without knowing properly what it is to love another. What a sad thought, I thought or said in my dream.
Remember when I told you about my parents dying, that day at college?
I remember.
I distinctly remember how you didn't say a word, but you were there for me. I found it an astonishing quality. You do it with your eyes. You're doing it now. You make space, like in the corners of your iris. With vampires, we call it our origin. Only our origin is created by pain. And with you, I could see you have pain. But you kept a little room, like a little hidden pantry, and you kept something there, something secret, a sense that you're right and they're wrong. I wish you could have told me that day. I wish you could have trusted me.
I didn't trust anyone, really. I reached in panic for the little blue moss at my bedside, but it wasn't there. My bed sat on the precipice of a cliff. I saw a fountain, a waterfall streaming below, and below at a distance, Netto, unmistakably, and others. But when I turned back to steady myself from falling, Chang was right beside me, so close to me. I saw his fangs. I felt his mouth come close to my neck. I froze, and then he gave it only a kiss, delicate as a boy's. I awoke, shivering. With fear? No, with cold. The entire apartment was freezing. Still, I was so relieved to be awake. I went to the thermostat. I'd turned off the heat at some point, I couldn't remember. Then I felt a breeze, and I felt my neck. I looked up. My skylight, it was open. My phone alarm went off and frightened me. I read it, sunrise. I'd gone to sleep prematurely. Idiot. I'd set a second alarm to remind me of my prescription and had done AM instead of PM. And just at that moment, I saw that it was beginning to snow. I ran and felt and inspected my neck again in the mirror. With every bit of bravery, I found the stepladder and climbed to shakily shut the skylight. I rushed to my closet and got the gun out. Then, I saw the pink bunny bag. And I swallowed hard. And I put the gun back, deep in the closet where it belonged.